On October 26, 1881, Ike Clanton picked up his pistol and rifle and began roaming the streets of Tombstone, Arizona, looking for Doc Holliday or any of the Earp family. Ike was a member of an association of outlaws called the Cowboys, and was also a successful cattle rustler and rancher. Ike felt that the Earp posse, Wyatt Earp, Marshall Virgil Earp, Morgan Earp, and Doc Holliday, had insulted him in the night before when he was not armed. Ike would proceed to go from saloon to saloon, threatening a fight with the Earps. One of the first people he would speak to was Ned Boyle, who was a bartender at the Oriental in Tombstone, saying as soon as the Earps show themselves, the ball would open and they would have a fight. Ned Boyle would warn Wyatt Earp in the night of this. Wyatt, Virgil, and Doc would all be awoken by different townspeople who were warning them of what Ike was saying. All would return to sleep, not taking what the cowboy was saying seriously, thinking the situation would change the next day after Ike had sobered up. The next morning, realizing that Ike had indeed continued his drinking and saloon conversation through into the next day, the Earps without Holiday would set out to find Ike. Wyatt Earp would search down Allen Street, while Morgan and Virgil searched down Fremont Street. Virgil Earp would recall what happened next. I found Ike Clanton on 4th Street between Fremont and Allen with a Winchester rifle in his hand and a 6-shooter stuck down in his breeches. I walked up and grabbed the rifle in my left hand. He let loose and started to draw his 6-shooter. I hit him over the head with mine and knocked him to his knees and took his 6-shooter from him. I asked him if he was hunting for me. He said he was, and if he had seen me a second sooner, he would have killed me. I arrested Ike for carrying firearms, I believe was the charge, inside the city limits. After this incident, Virgil would haul Ike to Judge A. Wallace's court for a weapons charge. Judge Wallace was not there, so Virgil went out looking for him while Morgan watched over Ike and held his weapons. After this, a large group gathered outside as Wyatt Earp walked into the courthouse with Deputy Sheriff and Clerk of Cockeyes County, Arizona Board of Supervisors, Rezin J. Campbell. Ike began his defense by saying, "You fellows haven't given me any show at all today," he thundered. "You've treated me like a dog. Fight is my racket, and all I want is 4 feet of ground." Then, turning on Morgan, he said, "If you fellows had been a second later, I would have furnished a coroner's inquest for the town," he threatened. "I will get even with all of you for this. If I had a 6-shooter now, I would make a fight with all of you." Morgan reacted by angrily offering Ike his revolver, saying, "Here, take this. You can have all the show you want right now." This would cause the crowd that had gathered at the courthouse to scatter, only to return a few minutes later after realizing no shots had been fired. After this incident, Wyatt Earp would respond to Ike by saying, "You have threatened my life 2 or 3 times and I have the best evidence to prove it, and I want this thing stopped." Then he thundered, "You cattle thieving son of a bitch, and you know that you are a cattle thieving son of a bitch. You've threatened my life enough, and you've got to fight." He then turned and left the courtroom in a rage. As he walked out, Wyatt almost collided with Tom McLaury, who was rushing to see what kind of mess Ike had gotten himself into. Earp snapped at McLaury, and McLaury fired back. "If you want to fight, I will fight you anywhere. Are you healed? Right here, right now," Earp quickly replied. In the same instant, Wyatt slapped him, jerked his own pistol, and knocked Tom to the ground with it. He stormed away muttering, "I could kill the son of a bitch." Not known for his rage and temper, Wyatt Earp would then walk to Hartford's corner, buy a cigar, and puff on it to calm his nerves. Soon after all of this, Frank McCleary and Billy Clanton would arrive into Tombstone. They would arrive with J.R. Frank to work on a deal in which they would provide 600 cattle to supply beef for the Union meat and poultry. After rumors began to circulate, this would lead the Earps to believe that Ike Clanton had telegraphed in Frank McLaury and Billy Clanton, which he had not. Marshall Earp would initially ask the sheriff of Tombstone, Johnny Behan, to help him arrest the cowboys. Behan refused and responded by saying, "Don't undertake to disarm that bunch, or they will kill you. They were just down at my corral having a gun talk against you and threatening your life. I will go down to where they are, they won't hurt me, and I will get them to lay off their arms." Virgil would agree to this and later regroup with Holiday and the other Earps. Initially, Marshall Earp chose to wait for the now 5-man cowboy posse to leave. Although Tom and Frank McLaury, Billy and Ike Clanton, and Billy Claiborne were most likely going to be leaving, they did not leave fast enough. Virgil would involve Doc Holliday directly, giving him his 10-gauge shotgun he had borrowed earlier from the Wells Fargo. Sheriff Behan would first approach Frank McLaury. McLaury would refuse to give him his weapons and insisted that he did not want to fight but refused to surrender his weapons. Billy Claiborne was awaiting grand jury action from a shooting in Charleston and disassociated himself from the gang and told Sheriff Behan that he had deposited his weapons at Kellogg's Saloon for the day. Both Ike Clanton and Tom McLaury told Sheriff Behan that they were not armed, while Frank McLaury and Billy Clanton were both clearly armed. While Behan was negotiating with the cowboy group, the Earps and Doc Holliday turned off 4th Street onto Fremont towards the OK Corral. Seeing this, Behan would tell the Clanton group, "I won't have no fighting. You must give me your firearms or leave town immediately." They replied by saying that they would not have any trouble. As he walked up to the Earp, Sheriff Behan would say, "Hold up, boys, don't go down there or there will be trouble. I have been down there to disarm them." The Earps misread this as if he had completely disarmed them, which he had not. He also did not intervene into the situation any further. The Clanton party was positioned in the top left corner of the OK Corral between the Harwood House and Fly's boarding house. Ike Clanton was between the two houses, while the McLaury brothers stood beside the Harwood house with 2 of their horses, which had had Winchester rifles on the saddle. The Earp posse was caught off guard by rifles in plain view and Billy Clanton and Frank McLaury wearing pistols. As the Earp posse approached, Virgil would enter the vacant lot with Wyatt right behind him and Morgan lingering on the sidewalk behind, with Doc Holliday in the far background acting as backup to the right behind them. As Marshal Virgil stepped up, he would say, "Throw your hands up, boys. I intend to disarm you." "We will," Frank McLaury said as he stepped forward and grabbed his revolver from his hip. Billy Clanton also then reached for his gun. Wyatt Earp then pulled his revolver. Virgil would then say, "Hold, I don't mean that." The first shot came from Wyatt Earp, who tore into Frank McLaury's belly left of the navel. The second shot came from Billy Clanton, who missed Wyatt. As Virgil fumbled awkwardly for his pistol, Doc Holliday with his double-barreled 10-gauge would step up towards Tom McLaury, who was moving behind one of the horses after Frank had stumbled to the ground. Ike would run up to Wyatt to be shoved away and have Wyatt say, "The fight's commenced. Go to fighting or get away." Ike then stumbled through the doors of Fly's into another vacant lot. Mortally wounded, Frank McLaury and Billy Clanton would begin firing rapidly. Frank would hit Virgil in the calf. Another bullet would hit Morgan Earp in the back, chipping a vertebrae, causing him to yell, "I am hit." The horse that Tom McLaury was behind began to buck wildly, and as soon as the horse exposed him, Doc Holliday would unload both barrels of his shotgun into Tom, knocking him to the ground with 12 buckshots in his right arm. Billy Clanton by that point had been hit twice, once in the chest and once in the wrist, and was shooting from the ground with his gun propped up on his knee. Frank would move down the lot behind the second horse, using it as a shield. After firing once, the horse would turn and run. Frank would then turn to Doc Holliday and say, "I've got you now." Doc replied with, "Blaze away, you're a daisy if you have." Holliday, Morgan, and Frank would all shoot simultaneously. Holliday struck Frank in the chest, Morgan struck Frank in the side of the head, and Frank's shot grazed Doc's hip and ripped through his coat. The 2 McLaurys and Billy Clanton were carried into the house on the corner of 3rd and Fremont, just past the Harwood house. Frank was dead, Tom died without speaking, and Billy Clanton told people he was murdered and told them to go away and let him die. The shootout left Tom, Frank McLaury, and Billy Clanton dead, with Virgil and Morgan Earp wounded. 3 days later, on October 29, 1881, warrants were issued for the arrest of the whole Earp posse, with each having a $10,000 bond. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more videos on American history. In many ways, it is forgotten in public memory that there was a murder trial following the gunfight at the OK Corral. This gunfight left Billy Clanton and Tom and Frank McLaury dead. The 1881 trial of Wyatt Earp and his posse is more interesting in many ways than the famous gun battle at the OK Corral. To hear more videos on American history, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe this video. In order to subscribe to this channel, click the subscribe button at the bottom right of the video. It is important to note the political standing of those that were involved in the Battle of the OK Corral. Wyatt, Virgil, and Morgan Earp, along with Doc Holliday, were being accused of killing the 3 cowboys while they were not armed and while they were surrendering. Sheriff Johnny Behan had a close public relationship with the McLaury posse. On October 28, 1881, at the coroner's inquest following the 3 deaths, Behan testified that the cowboys were surrendering. This helped push the trial forward and was a major reason for the trial in general. Johnny Behan and the cowboys were Democrats, alongside almost all of the ranchers in Cochise County as well. In 1880, Johnny Ringo, Curly Bill Brocious, and Ike Clanton all worked for the Democrats in a crucial election. Virgil and James Earp were veterans of the Union Army, so naturally, the Earp posse were Republicans. The judge that presided over the trial was Judge Wells Spicer. Professor of Law Stephen Lovett argues that there were 2 major previous gunfight cases that influenced Judge Spicer in the 1888 Earp Tombstone trial. Our first case comes from February of 1881. In February of 1881, Luke Short got into a fight with Charlie Storms. Luke Short was dealing faro in the Oriental Saloon in Tombstone, Arizona, when he got into a fight with Storms, who was drunk. Bat Masterson managed to break the fight up initially. Storms attacked Short as he exited the Oriental. During the brawl, both men reached for their pistols, but Short drew first and pressed his pistol against Storm's chest, shooting him through the heart, killing him instantly. Luke Short's claim of self-defense was accepted by a magistrate in Tombstone. The greatest influence on the case comes from the second case that happened on June 22, 1880, that involved Buckskin Frank Leslie. Buckskin Leslie was sleeping with May Killeen, who was the wife of Mike Killeen. On June 22nd, Leslie and May were standing outside the Cosmopolitan Hotel together in full view in Tombstone. Mike Killeen, who was across the street, then approached both of them with a pistol. As Mike approached, Leslie drew his pistol. Both men fired, but only Leslie hit his mark. Mike Killeen died several days later from his gunshot wound. Both Frank Leslie and George Pirine were charged with the murder of Mike Killeen. Leslie pleaded self-defense in a preliminary hearing with a magistrate in Tombstone. The magistrate accepted the self-defense claim. Leslie was later rearrested and was then freed again after a grand jury refused to indict him. Professor Lovett argues that there is no meaningful evidence to say that Judge Spicer was biased towards the defendants due to these 2 cases. Judge Wells Spicer was born in 1831 in Chemung, New York. He was a Republican who became county judge of Cedar County, Iowa in 1856. In 1872, Wells was appointed Commissioner of Salt Lake City, Utah by the Supreme Court. Wells moved to Tombstone in 1878, where he became a partner in a Tombstone tobacco company. To lead their defense, the Earp posse hired Nevada Congressman Thomas J. Fitch. Fitch was a distinguished Western attorney who had gained the nickname the Silver-Tongued Order of the Pacific. Leading the prosecution was William R. McLaury, brother of Tom and Frank McLaury, who was a lawyer from Fort Worth, Texas. According to Stephen Lovett, Will McLaury was raised in Iowa, but he moved to Texas after the Civil War. Although a Republican and a Northerner, he managed to establish a successful law practice by entering into partnership with Captain S.P. Green, a former officer in the Confederate Army. There were 5 main witnesses used by the prosecution. Let's begin with William Allen. William Allen testified that he followed the Earps as they were walking towards the OK Corral. Allen argued that Tom McLaury was not armed and that Billy Clanton had stated that he did not want to fight. Allen essentially testified that the Earp posse had provoked the McLaury posse, who did not want to fight. Our second pro-McLaury testimony comes from a local Tombstone mother by the name of Martha King. Martha King had spotted the Earp posse from a store as they were walking towards the OK Corral.
When I first walked in, the owner of the store seemed to be really excited and he didn't want to wait on me. So I inquired what was the matter, and it was then he said there was about to be a fight between the Earp boys and the Cowboys. I saw one of the Earp brothers go up to Doc Holliday and say, "Let them have it," to which Doc Holliday replied, "All right."
The most significant pro-McLaury testimony came from Sheriff Behan. According to Behan, once the Earp posse arrived at the OK Corral, Wyatt Earp stated, "You sons of bitches have been looking for a fight." Here is Sheriff Behan's testimony.
I saw a nickel-plated pistol in particular, which was pointed at one of the party. I think at Billy Clanton. My impression at the time was that Holiday had the nickel-plated pistol. I will not say for certain that Holiday had it. These pistols I speak of were in the hands of the Earp party. When the order was given to throw up your hands, I heard Billy Clanton say, "Don't shoot me. I don't want to fight." Tom McLaury at the same time threw open his coat and said, "I have nothing," or "I am not armed," or something like that. My attention was directed to the nickel-plated pistol for a couple of seconds. The nickel-plated pistol was the first to fire, and instantaneously a second shot, 2 shots right together, simultaneously. These 2 shots couldn't have been from the same pistol. They were too near together. The nickel-plated pistol was fired by the second man from the right. The third man from the right fired the second shot, if it can be called a second shot. Then the fight became general. The first 2 shots were fired by the Earp party.
Ike Clanton himself was an important witness. Here is a part of the testimony that was given by Clanton. He shoved his pistol up against my belly and told me to throw up my hands. He said, "You son of a bitch, you can have a fight." I turned on my heel, taking Wyatt Earp's hand and pistol with my left hand and grabbed him around the shoulder with my right hand. I held him for a few seconds. While I was holding him, he shot. I then went on across Allen Street. As I jumped into the door of the photography gallery, I heard some bullets pass by my head. Billy Claiborne was also a crucial witness for the prosecution. Claiborne testified the following.
When Doc Holliday fired, Tom McLaury staggered backwards. Billy Clanton fell up against the corner of the house and laid himself down on the ground. Frank McLaury had hold of a horse about the corner at a post. Ike Clanton, when I saw him, was dodging and trying to get away. Well, there were about 6 or 8 shots fired by the Earp party in rapid succession. Billy Clanton was lying on the ground and drew his 6-shooter, rested across his arm, and commenced firing. Frank, at that time, was out in the middle of the street with his 6-shooter. I did not see Frank pull his pistol. I saw it in his hand. Frank did not have a 6-shooter in his hand until after 6 or 8 shots had been fired by the Earp party.
During the trial, there was one particular witness who can be seen as a neutral witness. Addie Borland had a view of the gunfight at the OK Corral from the window of her home. Here is her testimony. For her testimony both helped and hurt the Earp posse.
I saw 5 men opposite my house on the afternoon of October 26, leaning against a small house west of Flies, and one of them holding a horse. The man with the horse was standing outside. I supposed these 5 to be cowboys. I saw 4 men coming down the street towards them. A man in a long coat walked up to the man with the horse and put a pistol to his stomach, and then the man with the coat stepped back about 3 feet. I was sitting in my house at the window when I saw this. The shooting commenced very few seconds later. I don't know which party fired first. It was impossible to tell. I was looking at both parties, but no one in particular. I did not know the man with the long coat at the time of the shooting. I now know him to be Doc Holliday.
Before diving into the testimony of the defendants, it is necessary to note that the situation for the Earps was different than that of Doc Holliday. Doc Holliday was a gambler and a notorious gunslinger who had outstanding charges on his record. The Earps, on the other hand, were distinguished lawmen who had become heavily involved economically and politically in Tombstone. Therefore, Doc Holliday was an easy target for the prosecution. There were 3 major pro-Earp testimonies. Wyatt Earp argued that the Clantons and McLaurys were dangerous criminals, stating that I had my pistol in my overcoat pocket. When I saw Billy Clanton and Frank McLaury draw their pistols, I drew my pistol. Billy Clanton leveled his pistol at me, but I did not aim at him. I knew that Frank McLaury had the reputation of being a good shot and a dangerous man, and I aimed at Frank McLaury. The first 2 shots which were fired by Billy Clanton and myself. He shooting at me and I shooting at Frank McLaury. I don't know which was fired first. We fired almost together. The fight then became general. The most important testimony came from Virgil Earp. Virgil Earp testified that Billy Clanton and Frank McLaury had their hands on their 6-shooters, and Tom McLaury was reaching for a Winchester rifle on a horse. According to Virgil, who was a well-respected lawman, who was both town and federal marshal, he had stated, "Boys, throw up your hands. I want your guns." Then, after seeing Frank McLaury and Billy Clanton draw and cock their 6-shooters, Virgil stated, "Hold on, I don't want that." Virgil testified that Billy Clanton fired his pistol and then Wyatt fired second. It is important to note that a Santa Fe Railroad engineer by the name of H.F. Seals gave testimony to all the threats of violence made on the Earps by the McLaury posse. In the end, Judge Wells Spicer sided with the Earp posse. I will now end this video by reading multiple parts of the conclusion and decision given by Spicer at the end of the trial. In view of all the facts and circumstances of the case, considering the threats made, the character and positions of the parties, and the tragic results accomplished in manner and form as they were, with all surrounding influences bearing upon res gestae of the affair, I cannot resist the conclusion that the defendants were fully justified in committing these homicides, that it is a necessary fact done in the discharge of an official duty. The evidence taken before me in this case would not, in my judgment, warrant a conviction of the defendants by trial jury of any offense whatever. I do not believe that any trial jury that could be got together in this territory would, on all the evidence taken before me with the rule of law applicable thereunto given them by the court, find the defendants guilty of any offense. Thank you for watching this video, and please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos on American history.